This is Land of Havilah, Ezra 4. Temple construction is underway. Now verse 1. Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity were building a temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel, they came near to Zerubbabel and to the heads of the fathers' households, and said to them, Let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves together will build to Yahweh, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. Comment in verses 1 and 2, some people of the surrounding nations approached Zerubbabel, saying they wanted to help build the temple. They said they've been worshiping Yahweh for about 150 years, ever since Assyrian king Esarhaddon brought them to the area. It's true that when the northern kingdom of Israel fell, the king of the Assyrian Empire transported people of multiple nationalities into the area. And it's true that since that time, they worshiped Yahweh, but not exclusively. They also continued to worship gods from their homelands, 2 Kings 17:24-34. So they weren't actually worshiping Yahweh since they weren't faithful to him, which is why verse 1 we just read calls them adversaries. So Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the other leaders of Israel made the right call in verse 3 by telling them, You have nothing to do with us, we'll build it ourselves, as Cyrus has commanded us. Coming up, the impostors will expose themselves for what they are. Verse 4, Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building. They hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Comment in verses 4 and 5, the neighboring nations did everything they could to discourage the Jews during construction. They weakened the hands of the people in verse 4. We'll find out what that means in the last verse of the chapter, that the Jews completely stopped work on the project. It wasn't because anybody forced them to stop, but because of some combination of intimidation, discouragement, lack of resolve, and falling for the propaganda against them. They began to agree with their opponents to the point that they said, the time isn't right, Haggai 1:2. Their opponents hired counselors against them in verse 5, meaning political consultants and PR consultants. So it was very much like today's propaganda, which has discouraged so many Christians from moving forward. Coming up still on the theme of opposition, the text will skip forward several decades to the period when the Jews were rebuilding a wall around Jerusalem. There had been no wall since Nebuchadnezzar broke it down, 2 Chronicles 36:19. Verse 6, In the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Midradath, Tabeel, and the rest of his companions wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and the writing of the letter was written in Syrian and delivered in the Syrian language. Rehum the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes the king as follows. Then Rehum the chancellor, Shimshai the scribe, and the rest of their companions, the Dinaites, the Apharsathites, the Tarpolites, the Apharsites, the Archavites, the Babylonians, the Shushankites, the Deahites, that is, the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Ansnapar brought over, and set in the city of Samaria, and in the rest of the country beyond the river, and so forth, wrote. Comment in verses 6 through 10, Samaria and the entire region west of the Euphrates is home to people of many national origins because about 150 years previously, Assyrian king Ansnapar took them out of their original homelands east of the Euphrates and brought them there, 2 Kings 17:24-34. They became Judah's new neighbors to the north. Ansnapar is Ashurbanipal by variant spelling. Again, the leaders of Samaria and other regions west of the Euphrates sent this letter to the king after the temple was built, at the time the Jews were rebuilding the city wall. Verse 11. This is the copy of the letter that they sent. To King Artaxerxes, from your servants the men beyond the river, be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from you have come to us to Jerusalem. They're building the rebellious and bad city and have finished the walls and repaired the foundations. Be it known now to the king that if this city is built and the walls finished, they will not pay tribute, custom, or toll, and in the end it will be hurtful to the kings. Now because we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not appropriate for us to see the king's dishonor, therefore we've sent and informed the king that search may be made in the book of the records of your fathers. You'll see in the book of the records and know that this city is a rebellious city and hurtful to the kings and provinces, and that they have started rebellions within it in the past. That is why this city was destroyed. We inform the king that if this city is built and the walls finished, then you'll have no possession beyond the river. Comment: Artaxerxes ruled east and west of the Euphrates, with the main part of it being east. In verses 11 to 16, the officials in the western part sent a letter eastward to Artaxerxes. They were trying to stir him up against the Jews. They said Jerusalem had a history of rebellion, which is true, but they also made the unfounded claim that the Jews will revolt if he allows them to keep fortifying the city. Furthermore, they claim the Jews will conquer all the land on their side of the river, like they did in the past, leaving Artaxerxes with nothing beyond the river. Now Artaxerxes' letter back to them, verse 17. Then the king sent an answer to Rehum the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe and to the rest of their companions who live in Samaria and in the rest of the country beyond the river. Peace. The letter which you sent to us has been plainly read before me. I decreed, and search has been made, and it was found that the city has made insurrection against kings in the past, and that rebellion and revolts have been made in it. There have also been mighty kings over Jerusalem who have ruled over all the country beyond the river, and tribute, custom, and toll was paid to them. Comment: Artaxerxes says he studied up on it, and it is true that Jerusalem was once a mighty power in the region, with its kings ruling over all the territory west of the river. He got it correct. David and Solomon ruled from Egypt to the river, 1 Chronicles 18:3 and 1 Kings 4:21, which was an extensive kingdom for the time. Therefore Artaxerxes says, verse 21, Make a decree now to cause these men to cease, and that this city not be built until a decree is made by me. Be careful that you not be slack doing so. Why should damage grow to the hurt of the kings? Comment: In other words, tell the men of Jerusalem to cease and desist construction of the wall and the city before it gets out of hand until I give you further orders. When his letter arrived in Samaria, verse 23, Then when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and their companions, they went in haste to Jerusalem to the Jews and made them to cease by force of arms. Comment: The Samaritan rulers went straight to Jerusalem to decree a stop to the work as ordered by Artaxerxes, and backed it up with a show of force. Coming now, there's an abrupt transition going backwards several decades to resume the history of the temple project, verse 24. Then work stopped on God's house which is at Jerusalem. It stopped until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Comment: Temple work stopped. Verse 4 above gave the reason that the people's hand was weakened due to the surrounding nations. It was a propaganda campaign against them, and the Jews swallowed it, even though there was no decree against them. They began to doubt the wisdom of the project, lost their resolve, and just quit. So after that rejoicing at the laying of the foundation, they quickly flamed out. They said, quote, The time hasn't yet come, the time for Yahweh's house to be built, Haggai 1:2. Everyone turned his attention to his own house, but not Yahweh's house, Haggai 1:9. So it's confusing because of that account that was inserted in there about the wall. The temple came first. They started on it the 2nd year after they arrived, and the wall came later. There was no decree against the temple, but they did stop working on it for a while. Later, there was a decree against the wall, but as we'll see, that decree got reversed. Ezra 5 is next.